And now, part 2 of the 3-part Conversations 3.0 with Jeff Nielson, Bond Fraud and Brainwashing.
Let's talk a little bit for the listeners who may be new to the metals and may be new to the idea of buying physical metal for the first time. What perspective can you give those folks, Jeff, on how they are still extremely early to the game if we take the entire worldwide GDP, if we consider all the worldwide trillions and trillions of dollars of derivatives, and if we consider how minuscule the gold and silver markets are. And now you've just told me that people in Canada are still asleep to precious metals for the most part, as are people in America. At $24.50 an ounce in silver and whatever gold's at, 14, people aren't late to this game, are they?
No, and you know, there's so many different ways to approach that question. You can approach it as a monetary argument, you know, a currency argument, and talk about basically how, you know, gold is not only the best form of currency, but it's the one currency on the planet that's not being rapidly diluted. You can advance the relative scarcity argument and point out that when you look at the rate that populations are rising and global incomes are rising, and compare that to the amount of new mine supply coming onto the market each year, then gold continues to become relatively more scarce. So, of course, if something's becoming steadily more scarce, that's saying the same thing as it can't possibly be becoming overvalued. If anything, it's becoming, you know, less fairly valued as it becomes more scarce. And then, you know, the final argument is simply to look at basically the destruction of the currencies and the safe haven argument. And, you know, in that sense, you know, when the paper currencies, which are no longer backed by anything, start to really scare people, you know, much more seriously than they have so far, you know, where are people going to go for a safe haven? Because the moment the currencies themselves are no longer safe, that means that the bonds for all these countries are no longer safe either. And if you eliminate cash and you eliminate bonds as safe havens, what have you got left?
You're right, and it's stunning. It's just stunning to see people put so much money into these bonds. It's lunacy to think that this government can possibly repay those and that people feel that that is a safe investment. It is truly the biggest bubble in the history of mankind, I think.
And I mean, I would refer to it as almost criminal in the way that so much of the mainstream media, you know, not only is failing to warn people about this, but are actively going out of their way to push bonds on people. I mean, you know, in essence, I mean, that's a fraud almost every bit as serious as what's being done in the housing market.
I agree.
And, you know, so very likely, you know, we're going to see a, you know, bond fraud scenario unfolding not too far down the road as well. I mean, there's just so many reasons for us to be angry and afraid. And, of course, you know, the general circumstances are bad enough, but when you don't get the good information and in fact, apparently have a large element in society that are eager on spreading disinformation, you know, then we get to what you're talking about fascism, and I mean, even, you know, start to venture into more, you know, wild thought about what our governments are really representing now.
Well, you're right about that, and we don't have to talk about a New World Order agenda on this call, but I think that might be what you're driving at, or at least as it relates to a one-world global government. This seems to be deliberate, and I think when I say seems to be, I should be saying is clearly deliberate. And I think the destruction of currencies worldwide is absolute lunacy. You might want to call it the terminal madness of the end times. At the end of the day, to own physical silver and to own some physical gold is really liberating. I can't more strongly suggest dipping your toe in the pool and knowing that you're still early to the party, that you will be one of the few people in your city that actually has physical metal.
Well, you know, in that respect, people in Asia have a much more sophisticated understanding of the concept of money. You know, for instance, in Indonesia, there's an active movement to try to phase out a lot of the paper and replace it with
the dinar?
A gold dinar and a silver dinar. And, of course, you know, this isn't the business leaders of the large corporations in Indonesia who are pushing this. This is a grassroots movement, you know, from, you know, small merchants and just ordinary consumers that want to make this change because, you know, they despite their supposedly inferior educations, have a much better appreciation of what's taking place with our currencies. And here's something that I'm probably, sure that nobody is aware of outside of, maybe a few people in academia. Our institutes of higher learning basically abandon any pretext of objectively teaching economics close to a century ago.
Yep.
And, the strange thing, when you look around to the people who've been drawn to the gold sector and silver sector as commentators, and investors in that, you don't see a high degree of representation among economists and people with an economics background, because we were all brainwashed when we went to school. We were all told that, currency that was backed by nothing is normal. And, when I tried to wrap my head around why I should think the scraps of paper in my wallet were worth something when I was an economics student, and I couldn't quite figure it out, I figured that was a failing on my part. Somehow I wasn't quite smart enough to understand what I was being taught. And of course, then I get exposed to some of the brilliant minds in the precious metal sector, many with no formal economics training whatsoever, and they start explaining the realities of money printing and our central banks, and connecting the dots for me because I had been so deluded with my education, and then boom, the light bulb goes on. And so, see, this is another huge disadvantage we face here compared to people in Asia, which don't have, their entire world of academia brainwashed and turned against them. We have these parrots who call themselves economists, and basically all they're doing is, repeating the message that they've been programmed to repeat by the bankers, for the better part of a century, with no measure of understanding. It's just simply repetition. They're high priests. They're not scientists in any respect.
Well, you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, it's mass brainwashing, and it's a sophisticated plan. It is a rabbit hole that runs extremely deep, and generally speaking, for me, the deeper I've gone, the more I realize that the hole is far deeper than I can get to the bottom of. But as far as I've gotten, the world starts to make a lot more sense when you evaluate the news that is being spoon-fed to us through the lens of understanding of what real money is, and through the lens of understanding what the lies have been, and what the lies perpetrated against the American public have been since the founding of the Federal Reserve in 1913. Once you understand money creation, once you understand fiat dollars, and once you understand the power of the printing press not backed by gold and silver, everything else makes sense. They've bought off the politicians. Thomas Jefferson said, if you ever turn over the control of the currency to the group of private bankers, they will buy up your country, and the sons will be left homeless in the country their forefathers conquered. And I think what's been more difficult for me is I have a really difficult time waking people up. So I'm grateful for the YouTube channel. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak with folks like yourself, because it's refreshing to be able to have a conversation with someone who's informed. It's refreshing to put information out there for people who care to know. But most people don't care to know. They want to stay asleep.
Well, that's the problem when you have people, first of all, engaging in a very heavy degree of brainwashing and creating this paradigm for people that they're comfortable with. Generally speaking, people are not amenable to change. Everybody likes it if their life just stays the same day after day after day. There's a small group of people that relish that sort of thing, but for most of us, we like consistency. And so, when people come up with strange and frightening ideas, and you get some reassuring authority figures saying, don't worry, they don't really understand things. We're taking care of you. We understand. That's a very alluring message, and it's just part of the nature of brainwashing, which is that once it's sunk in, and once people's minds have been gripped in that vice lock, that comes with propaganda, that's when it becomes so much more difficult to deprogram them.
This concludes Part 2, and don't miss Part 3 of Conversations 3.0, Bullion, Mining Stocks, and Hyperinflation. Click here.